Hey there, Internet Drifters. It's Izanami-kun, and we're having a Saturday play and write character development because we have too many characters. So we're going to try to get some of them out of the way so that they don't keep piling up behind us. Today, we're going to develop the character of Porpoise. I don't really like his name, but I can't think of what else to call him, so that's what we're going to go with. We usually don't change people's names unless they absolutely have to be, but I don't know, Porpoise just seems like, but whatever, he came that way. So he kind of reminds me of Matt's in that he's kind of not exceptional. He has no passion, which Matt's had some passion in his social, but Porpoise is just kind of your regular everyday person. Everyday people have stories too, don't get me wrong. It's not like he hasn't had a life worth telling a story about. It's just not really present in what we're given. So I think since Matt's had some stuff that we could go off of, you know, he had this weird 300-year gap of cryosleep that we could kind of explain and everything, and he was kidnapped, and you know, that created a little more intrigue. I think this character, Porpoise, we're gonna have to find a little bit more creative spirit, do a little bit more of the actual development ourselves instead of using media, which, you know, it's a thing you're gonna have to do as a writer. You can't always go on what information you have to use. You sometimes have to pluck some things out of the aether and say, we're gonna say this is true, and now this is an integral part of the story we have to include into it. Not because you absolutely have to, because then it would be part of the story, part of the plot, and things that would be guiding your creative process. But because once you've decided this is part of the character, that means it's set. It determines how that character is going to respond to things. And if you don't include that thing into the work, it's not going to make as much sense. Or it runs the risk of going against what that character would naturally do. So Porpoise was a herder, a weaver. He's had no time in cryosleep. I feel that's kind of an important aspect too, is that he obviously came from this planet that we're on and was never in a cryostasis chamber, never missed out any history since the day he was literally born. It's all been just completely waking for 35 years. He's got a little bit of interest in melee, plants, animals, and crafting, kind of making him into a very tribal sort of being. Those are all basic tribe elements. I mean, the medical thing, yeah, you could say that medical and social, those would be tribe elements too. Maybe the artistic, however, those aren't in all members of a tribe. You know, there's a chieftain or whatever who does the main part of the social interactions and the ambassadoring kind of thing between other tribes, diplomatic relations. The medical, like there's usually a doctor kind of person in a tribe that does that. You don't do that as a normal tribesman. The artistic thing, again, that's not common throughout all tribal people. So, and then the construction, mining, that's not really tribal at all. Intellectual, that's definitely not tribal. Shooting, that could be a tribal thing, like because of bows and arrows, but you know, that one could go any which way. I guess the other tribal ones could go any which way, but So the things that he has an interest in are very tribal-like abilities. They're, when you think about the bare basic, like, we barely know how to make tools kind of tribe, those are the things you think of. Okay, I can do a little bit of hand-to-hand combat, but maybe not like martial arts kind of combat, just, you know, basic, like, I'm strong, beat you up kind of thing. You think about them knowing the plants, whether or not they plant plants is irrelevant. They know the different types of plants to harvest, and they may harvest trees, different other planty sort of things to use as tools. They have an affinity for animals. Again, they may not necessarily do like animal husbandry, but they may have some contact with animals that is sort of like the step right before like a ranch sort of atmosphere, where it's sort of like, well, these are wild beasts, but I can talk to them and get their milk from them, and they don't try to kill me. And then crafting, obviously you have to weave like different stuff for being in tribal era. You have to make clothes, but not like shirt and pants clothes, more like the whatever it's called. You have to craft bowls, you have to craft the tools to work with. So those are all very, very tribal sort of things. So I'm going to say that he was originally from a tribal atmosphere. Now, he actually came from one of the, he wasn't from the pirate tribe or pirate faction. I believe he was from the fierce one, whichever one that was. I don't know, red or blue. Take your pick. It was one of those two. They're damn near the same name, so it's hard to really keep track of them. But I believe he was from one of those two. And so they were tribes, you know, they were very tribal kind of factions. So the idea of all of this technology that's going on in our colony may be a little more than he's used to, potentially. He came over with Red also. And Red was a bully when he was like, that literally was his childhood thing. He was a bully, and then he was, I don't remember what the other one was, but he was something else that was kind of badass and violent. And when Porpoise kind of lost his shit when he was in jail and went after Red because he was berserk, Red throat punched him and immediately incapacitated him. And that said to me that there was kind of a, there was definitely a relationship already there, where Red was clearly the abusive, violent personality that sort of lorded over Porpoise, and Porpoise just had to kind of take that. He was just used to that. That was just how he was. And he is, oddly enough, he's a careful shooter, which he doesn't have an interest in shooting, but he's very careful about it. And that could just be because of the traumatic experiences that he had with Red, that he doesn't really enjoy shooting, but he's very careful about it, possibly because he has to be, or he has had to be. He's bisexual, which, I mean, is neither here or there, really. I don't know that that forms a whole lot of his backstory, necessarily. There's really no mention in this game about the world, the politics of sexual tendencies. So I guess we can just say that maybe he was kind of closetly bisexual. I don't know that he's had a relationship, or maybe he did have a relationship, or maybe he wanted a relationship with Red or somebody that Red knew. And maybe that was part of the reason why they were kind of targeting, like Red targeted Porpoise a little bit harshly. But it could have just been Red's personality too. It's really, I don't know that that's a necessary element. And then he's also neurotic, which I don't remember what that necessarily means, but I believe that it meant that I think it added to his intellectual a little bit, but also made it easier for him to have a mental break, which he did have a mental break. So mission accomplished, I guess. And that's really about where things end. I mean, we can go into the specifics over here a little bit and say, well, he did do a fair amount of medical with no interest to get that 7. So he obviously tended to the wounded in his tribe, and they were either the fierce or the hostile, like one way or the other. They were an angry tribe that did a lot of attacking, no matter which tribe he was actually from. So there would be a lot of opportunities to increase that medical. And he didn't have an interest, but maybe he was just good at it, or maybe he was in an opportune position to learn the medical. He's got a lot of skill in crafting, which means that he worked more with developing tools and the clothing and other stuff. I think, were they naked? I don't remember if they were naked or not. I don't think they were. But obviously he had a hand in some of the crafting. Maybe they were, maybe they grew psychite, and as part of their like drug ritual, you know, religious ceremony type thing, or even just to sell. And maybe he crafted that. I think that's crafting. I know the smoke leaf is crafting. It doesn't actually gain up your skill, which I think is kind of silly, but I guess it makes a little bit of sense. You can't exactly craft a fantastic bow after years of rolling joints. You know, like that, I can kind of understand why that. But at the same time, I feel like that should have some bearing on increasing skill, because you're still doing something. I don't know. But it doesn't really matter, because he must, like, I think he must have done a lot of clothing. He obviously had a lot of tribal influence behind his personality forming, his likes and dislikes and all of that. There wasn't any real damage to him physically, so I don't think that he's done a lot of actual raiding. I'm gonna say, creative liberty wise, I'm going to say that this was his first raid. Like, this was the first time he was actually on a raid, and all of this skill that he had here was either from hunting or from practicing with the others around him. I mean, maybe he had a few other minor raids before with other tribal people, because I mean, I guess at 35 that's kind of a late start to raiding, so maybe it wasn't his first raid. I don't know that I can go that far, but he definitely wasn't experienced at it, because he put more effort into doing the medical thing. I think he would have probably stayed behind to patch people up, or go on raids and stay behind while they did the work, so that he would be there when they got off the map to patch them up, so that they could, you know, continue on home or whatever. So we come over here, and our notes about him is that born and raised tribal, never in cryo sleep. By the way, I don't know if I'm spelling cryo sleep right. I don't know if it's supposed to have an H or not, so it doesn't really matter. These are just notes, you know. If I was writing something to make into a finished product, I would spell check it and deal with that then. But I'm not, so I'm not going to bother with making sure that it's spelled correctly. So he's never in cryo sleep, raised tribal. Interests are tribal based. Did a lot of basic medical, tribal medic. No, not medical. He was bullied, targeted by Red for some unknown reason. So let's get a little a little creative and say, you know, that can factor into a story, right? He's bisexual. Maybe he was in a relationship with Red's sister and broke up for a man. And maybe Red didn't like that. Whether or not it had anything to do with his bisexual nature, not really relevant. But Red probably would have been upset. Like, hey, seriously? You're gonna choose this dude over my sister and break her heart? That's fucked up. I don't like you anymore. I'm gonna beat the shit out of you emotionally until I feel satisfied. Maybe Porpoise didn't actually get to be in the relationship with that guy. Maybe the guy was all like, oh, I only like brave people. So prove to me that you're brave. And maybe that's why he was on this raid. Maybe he was trying to impress some guy. And then him and Red, they were like sitting in their jail cell like, oh, this is all because of you, you know. The only reason why we went on this raid was because, you know, you needed to prove that you were brave. And so you came with us. And if we had had anybody else, maybe we would have won. Which, obviously, they wouldn't have. They impaled themselves on my spike traps. It wouldn't have mattered who they were or how good they were. They still would have impaled themselves on my spike traps. But, you know, from Red's point of view, he may have blamed Porpoise for the whole thing and just been completely like, oh, I'm so tired of you. He was a herder as a child, though. Obviously, they're not like the tribal kind of people that were before civilization-y sort of things. If he was a herder, I mean, that's animal husbandry. It's a little outside of tribal. You know, you think tribal, that's technically like hunter-gatherer, living off the fat of the land. Maybe we have a place that we call home, but it's not as developed. It's not really as permanent, you know, because the more permanent you make a colony or whatever, the more it becomes a civilization, and it's no longer a tribe. I don't know that tribes use brick. I think they use like the clay and straw sort of house setup. And that might technically resemble brick in some cases. But I don't know. Like when I think about the Mayans, I don't really think about them as being tribal. You know, and they have elaborate structures and everything. And they definitely, I'm sure they did animal husbandry. They definitely had crops and shit. And like, but so I don't really think about that as being tribal. When I think of tribal, I think of something a little more living off the fat of the landy about it. But maybe I'm wrong. I could be wrong. That happens. So I think the big story of Porpoise's life, and why the hell is he called Porpoise? Is that just like a family name? That's got to be a family name, because there's nothing about him that's like a porpoise. I mean, maybe he's jovial. Maybe the bisexuality. I don't know. I have no idea, but I don't know that he's really a porpoise-like person. So the story element is really that he is trying to prove he is brave by going on a raid when he doesn't technically go on raids. It's not something that he does, but I guess he must have done it in the past. You know, he's 35 years old. I'm sure that in his early 20s, maybe late teens, he probably did raids. He probably knew what he was doing back then, but things changed. Or maybe, you know, we're a new kind of colony. So maybe them coming to attack us was really what threw the wrench in his whole fucking life plan. Because maybe he was thinking, oh, it's, you know, just going to be a bunch of inept people with guns, maybe not. And I'll just be able to beat them up, because I'm pretty sure they had melee weapons. I'll just be able to beat them up and then go home. Somebody will tend to my wounds. Maybe the guy that he fell in love with or, liked or whatever, maybe he was also a medic. And they were, going for the, what is it, Florence Nightingale syndrome? Is that what it's called? So he went on a raid to prove that he is brave, to impress another tribal medic. But Red was heading the raid and was upset, maybe even insulted by Porpoise recent breakup with Red's sister. And maybe the two were unrelated. Maybe he didn't actually leave her for this guy. Maybe he just left her because he was like, I'm fucking done, man. This isn't working. And then started becoming attracted to this other guy. But to Red, I don't know that distinction would have been big enough to really worry about. Red probably would be like, dude, you left her for this guy that you're now trying to impress. Even if it wasn't technically true. So then the story really just happens right before they come across our civilization. And it's poetic, really. The poetic justice of it all is that Red was never going to be turned until Hammer had an inspired recruit. And then recruited Red before Porpoise. Which may have, in theory, broken Porpoise's spirit a little bit, like, oh, wow, I never thought Red would turn his back on our tribe. What does that mean? How do I feel about this? What should I do? Who are these people? What is this colony that it has such power over Red, the most faithful to our tribe? Or, maybe one of, because Red looked like a good candidate for one of the top warriors, maybe the top warrior of his tribe. I mean, I'm not saying that tribal people tend towards bullies, but in this particular case, they were a hostile tribe. That's got to be something that they encouraged. So I think Red was probably, a hero and was probably super into the tribe and was never going to turn his back. And then we, of course, had an inspired recruit, and Hammer was like, no, come on. And Red was like, okay. And then Porpoise is left there by himself for a little while. I mean, I'd separated them, so he was by himself anyway, but he knew that Red was out. He had to know that Red was out. And was just like, what the hell? What about Red's sister? Doesn't he care about his own sister? Are we never going to go back? Is this part of his plan that he's going to, pretend like he's one of them and then we break free? And then Red left on a mission, a rescue mission. And Porpoise, eventually, pretty quick after that, was then turned. Or maybe it was right before, but it was somewhere around there. And they were divided pretty quickly, even when they were both our colonists. So there was never any time for them to really talk about the plan. Or maybe there was like a moment to talk about any sort of plan, but there wasn't any moments to follow through with any plan. So I'm going to say that they were going to stage a coup of some sort. They were, going to run away and never be seen again. And maybe technically Red did that. I mean, he did get carried off by pirates. Maybe that was part of his plan. I think they were pirates. They might have been his previous tribe. I really wasn't paying attention. Red may have ended up abandoning Porpoise with our colony. And at this point, he might just kind of be like, I don't know that there's anything to go back to anyway. Red is a powerful character in that tribe, and even if Porpoise goes back, Red is going to hate him forever for what he did to his sister. It's kind of a sad story a little bit, but at the same time, we can give him an opportunity at our colony to really make a pleasant life where he can have all the relationship drama he wants. We're going to make sure that everybody's happy despite whatever fuckery he comes along romantic wise. He breaks up with people, they're going to have a mood debuff. I'm on it. I'm going to figure something out. And maybe they'll break, but it'll be short-lived. He won't have to deal with that forever. Whereas I think Red was going to hold a grudge. I don't think Red was ever going to let it go. He was always going to hate Porpoise. And that was just the way it was going to be forever. And he was going to have to deal with that. And now that Red is gone, whatever plan there may have been is now under reassessment, because Porpoise really has to ask himself, is he better off without Red at all? Is he better off in a colony, in a village, in a tribe, whatever, that does not include Red? I'd like to think that the answer is yes. But I guess that's part of the story that we have yet to see. So before we move forward, we'll wrap this up and say Raid got them both imprisoned by us, and Red was miraculously recruited the war hero of the tribe, the most faithful, was convinced. Have to show the incredulity there. He was convinced Red had a plan to lose to fellow tribesmen. I'll have to go back and verify, but I'm gonna stick with this idea that those were his tribesmen that carried him off. Otherwise, why wouldn't they just kill him and take all the stuff? There was so much stuff there. They could have easily taken some of that stuff. Instead, they chose to take the people. They took Red and they took Hammer. And maybe they took Hammer because Hammer was the one that convinced Red to join. You know, maybe Red sent a message or something to his old tribe and was like, we're going to be here because we're doing this thing. And it's just me and Hammer. And I want you to bring us both back. Because Hammer is a valuable person, and we could probably use him as an elder at our tribe. He has connections. He's a human. I don't even know how to say that word, but he's that. That's what he is. He is one of those. And so he had some clout with the upper echelon of the more developed world in their world. So that would be valuable to the tribes. So I think that he got stolen on purpose. Sent a message to tribe to also bring Hammer back as valued royal elder. Left Porpoise there. Probably was like, good riddance. We don't need him anyway. He was a terrible person, and we just exchanged him for this Hammer guy who's way better. Because, you know, in some ways, Hammer kind of was better than Porpoise. I don't know that he's better for our purposes, but he was a great leadership sort of person. He had the potential to go the distance because he didn't want to do a goddamn fucking thing as an actual colonist, and that's what made him valuable. And maybe that's what Red saw in him too. I don't know. ... And so now here we are, left with the question, what's next for Porpoise? I really want to change his name. I really do. I don't know what to change it to, though. Leave in the comments if you have an idea for what I should change Porpoise's name to, because it's killing me. I'm really not digging his name. I feel like he needs to reinvent his whole identity with a new name, but I don't know what name to give him. I'm sort of in a never-ending story conundrum here. Give me a name. Any name. Don't even care. Write in the comments. And that concludes our character development of Porpoise. Like if you liked the video, subscribe if you haven't already, check me out on Patreon, check out my website izanamikun.com, and I will see you guys in the next video.